But it's been an interesting time where it has opened an opportunity, what we were talking about before, for us to be more creative.
Reema, I wanted to say thank you for hopping on the Creative Haven podcast. It's really cool to actually talk with other creatives, especially people in the filmmaking world. Mm-hmm. And, you have a background in short films and filmmaking. And it's interesting, too, because you also have degrees in communications and economics and business. So it's awesome to see that intersection. But I'd love for you to just give a background on yourself. And also, what was like a moment in your life you're proud of?
So reflective. I don't think I've done that in a while. Okay. Yeah. So I started in sort of the feature film world. Mm-hmm. Started in kind of feature films, producing shorts, all sorts of like whatever I could get my hands on. And then the ultimate goal was features. So when I was 24, I made my first full like SAG length feature film.
Nice.
Which was basically probably the most telling experience of anything that came after. That was sort of the impetus into this whole arena. From there, I worked in, financial communications for a bit, worked on a lot of like freelance projects and everything like that. And then eventually I had come to California for grad school. And it was kind of the time when you saw like EMT merging, so entertainment, media, and technology were all coming together. Mm-hmm. And my co-founder and I, we had this background in filmmaking on the indie side. So we were very aware of, no resources, no budget, but like, how do you get great production value? We were really good at that. So we sort of saw this need of smaller companies, wanting to leverage video, but thinking they had to kind of make like a, multi-million-dollar Apple commercial to really use video. Mm-hmm. So I think for us, we came in at that time where we had these skills that we could really serve to this market that had, smaller budgets, but wanted to use video as a tool to kind of get their story or brand out there. So we started seeing that shift, and that's kind of when we launched Luminoustudios, which is the company that I actively, work on right now. And we specialize in short form content. Mm-hmm. So anything from ad films to commercials to explainers to, social media content, anything in between. So that's kind of the quick journey of where everything came from. But most of it started with very traditional filmmaking.
That's amazing. And any proud moments during that whole journey? Any short films that you loved? Any festival experiences? Any clients that grew up on set? That's a funny story.
Let's see. This is a story, a proud moment, all of it combined. I remember when we were shooting our feature-length film called Butterflies of Bill Baker. Nice. So it's like a pretty large SAG production. We had like really, good name talent on set. And we were shooting in upstate New York, and it was a night shoot. And it was like it's a psychological thriller. So we were shooting at like 3 a.m, and there was like yelling, and we'd rented out this beach house, and it was just like a very intense scene. And I remember I reached there with like 40 crew and a cast that's been flown in from LA, and security comes and basically tries to say like, oh, you're not permitted to do this here. We were literally like, oh God, what am I supposed to do now? And like crew's trying to unload, like giant truck of stuff. And I still remember that was an exciting moment because like looking back, obviously it scared the shit out of me because I'm like, what am I supposed to do here? I was like, I was 24 years old trying to produce this thing. And I remember just being able to like, I talked to them. I talked to there was a cop and a security officer and like the head of their village department. And I sort of took my PA with me and I went into their office and I sort of, I tried to like alleviate the situation and just sort of sweet talked my way out of it. And we still managed to shoot. And I was nervous the entire night. I just didn't sleep. I was just awake for everything. And every little sound freaked me out. But we managed to get 24 hours of shooting in. And so that was a super proud moment because I remember it like all shit was going to hit the fan. And then I managed to get us out of that. So that was exciting.
Oh, I love that story. No, and congratulations for getting it done. You got the feature done. No reshoots. Everything was
no reshoots.
There you go.
We did a few pickups, and then we even managed to get distribution, like digital distribution. But which was exciting back then.
Yeah, no, I think I love that story because I think that when people are filming now, especially with YouTubers, they run out with their camera and they're in front of places and they're so DIY and it's so cool and free. and they have a 1-person or a 3-person team, and they don't care. They're in Venice Beach by the boardwalk.
Totally.
And then we come from the background of, we need a permit because we have a crew of 30 people and, you know, a 1-ton grip truck, and it's getting intense here.
Seriously. Oh my, that was one of, so I lived in New York a lot for several years, but I remember when I moved out to LA, I mean, permitting out here was like, it was so much more complex than it was out there. And I remember that was the time I'm, man, like, I just want to do 1-man band, just go shoot and come back. But yeah.
No, it's cool that you actually have that mentality of the 1-man band, because I think that for you to have the background of a filmmaker and then doing, you know, short form content, digital content, and marketing content on a low budget, relatively low budget, right? Yeah. It helps you be scrappy, you know? Yeah. And I think that our, you know, type of companies, you know, we are actually the future of a lot of the content out there, because, you know, I have friends who do have production companies where, you know, it's a minimum $100,000 a day. And it's like, there's some companies out there who can't do that. At the same time, we want to be able to have the best quality in our films. And so when you were getting into, you know, filmmaking at first, let's start in the emphasis of films. So how did you get into films? What was that film? What was that experience?
It was, so I always knew I wanted to sort of be in entertainment and media. I think I liked, even when I was much younger, I just liked how universal visual content was. Like, you don't really have to understand the language of something. You might not even understand what's going on, but like visually you can take so much out of a shot or a scene or any piece of movement that happens on screen. So that was kind of the part that I loved about it. And then I was just always enamored by the medium and using it to tell stories or using it to communicate. So when I was in college, I was a broadcast journalism and economics major. So as a broadcast journalist, I did a lot of long form, like doc style pieces. I worked more on the documentary side of things. And then through that experience, I kind of was intrigued with films. So I started producing student films and short films on campus, like, you know, really random stuff. I had zero experience or anything like that. And then my co-founder today, her and I were in college together, and she was producing her senior thesis.
Nice.
She asked me, she's like, hey, do you want to like produce it? And I was like, sure, but I've never, ever done this. And at that point, I realized that the film school had a minor in producing that I could take. And so I was like, yeah, sure, I'm going to take the minor and I'm going to produce the student film, and this would be great. And then at the same token, I went to school out in New York. So I was, you know, very fortunate to have a lot of internship opportunities. So I got to work a lot with media companies, and it sort of taught me all the stuff I didn't like. So through, you know, process of elimination of not liking so many aspects of production, of like, you know, studio production, corporate types of production, like nightly news. Like I remember I interned for Nightline at one point. And then being able to do the student film, which I really liked. I'm like, oh, cool. This works. Like, this is what I want to get into.
Wow. No, I love that, because you went from the broadcast journalism all the way to producing features, and now with a short form production company. And and I love that that journey, because a lot of film school students, they don't know about the business of film. It's actually something that's missing. Was missing from my education. I went to UC Santa Barbara, and it was mostly production and theory. And so I had no idea to tell you the truth, I had no idea what the difference between a studio and a production company was. I didn't know what an agency was. I didn't know what a manager was. I didn't understand development, and I didn't understand the idea of selling a TV show to a production company that's CBS, but then CBS still has to buy it, and you can have a CBS production company sell it to Fox. It was so confusing. And so it's cool that you went through that whole experience, and now that you're in digital, what are your thoughts now as a filmmaker going into digital and seeing the difference? Like, what do you feel like has given you a lot of creativity? Has it given you more freedom to be in the digital world? Have you felt a little bit limited? Like, what were your thoughts about being in digital now compared to like a feature film and filmmaking?
For sure. I mean, I think the reason that we were willing to kind of go down this path also, so like, we worked on feature films, and especially this one feature that was kind of, like our baby that we literally raised for, fully ran, fully produced, distributed the whole start to finish. It taught us a lot, but also, it was a time when distribution was in the midst of changing, and now it's like drastically changed. But like, you kind of, the longevity, like what you said, like producing something, like getting a film, shot, edited, out to festivals and distributed in like 3 years. That's like a win, right? That's like, oh, wow, that's awesome. And we were just like, wow, it's been super inspiring and enjoyable and a great learning process, but we weren't able to actually be like telling stories and filming content that often, right? If it takes 3 years in a good situation to make one movie. So for us, kind of going into short form content helped blend together some level of stability, and even like cash flow, if you will, and then actual storytelling and practicing our craft more regularly, where now we get to shoot a few videos a quarter or a month, So like that kind of bringing that together, I feel really lucky that we were able to do that. And we saw that opportunity. Because as much as, I loved films and I would love to go back there in a certain way, but it taught me so much that I would really have to go down that path in a very particular way, and the limitations of what I do now is that I work with clients. So at times, your freedom or your creativity or what you might want to do isn't what a client wants to do, and you're going to produce content for them. So you kind of follow those guidelines, right? So you sometimes get a client that's willing to push boundaries or willing to be extra creative. And then sometimes you get clients that want to be very traditional. You can make recommendations, but at the end, you don't have too much of a say beyond that unless they're receptive. So that's the limitation. But at the end of the day, we still get to write scripts, tell stories, be on set, produce content. And that's what's super enjoyable for us.
Yeah, that's beautiful, because I think that a lot of filmmakers are artists. We are artists, and there's a part of us that just wants to move to Paris and just make films 24/7 and put our phones down and not have any internet. So to me, I kind of feel that the idea of taking films towards the business route and into marketing is a shift in mindset and shift in your hat. You're creating more of a livelihood out of your filmmaking and your art, rather than creating an art and then hoping somebody pays you for that art.
Yeah.
And so how was that transition for you? Was it something that you used your short film, you found clients, you sent out your reel and said, hey, I got you, and I'll do this. I want to do this kind of video for you. Was it like a lot of spec work? What was your process? Because this is for like that filmmaker who's listening, wants to know how to transition into this world.
Yeah, definitely. So what we did is basically we had come up with that, like, okay, we see this opportunity, and we had, done the whole raising money, having investors or getting grants and doing all that. So we're like, okay, we don't want to, have to do all of that for this new business. We want to kind of see what's there. We'll invest our time and our energy, but we don't want to have to kind of raise a bunch of money or invest our own money into it. So what we did was we kind of came up with what we wanted this to be and what we thought our target audience is, right? So we saw the opportunity. We're like, okay, who could make use of what we can offer? We built out kind of what I like to say, like a skeleton of the company, like a bit, like we had a full business plan and what we want this to be and what we want this to look like. But before we dove too deep into it, we just really tried to leverage relationships, referrals, cold emails to potential businesses that we thought would be into this. And we basically priced ourselves at like, seemingly at cost. So we gave them a great deal, like whatever it would cost me to like hire a DP and also like negotiate with the DP, like a really, really forgiving rate for this first opportunity. That's what we did for about 3 or 4 projects to just have, enough portfolio experience to show, because if they just see filmic work, they're not going to understand that you can do brand videos or promos, right? You might not even be able to until you can actually get to do it. So I still remember I think we had 3 of those that we did And then we started, because we had those three, and each experience just, I mean, you learn more. Like, you just sound smarter after doing one of them, you know, like if you can talk more confidently with whoever your potential client is, that's a big, you know, positive in the situation. So we made those three. And then I still remember, we had done, and then we got kind of a few small ones here or there where we kept the same structure, but we worked, there was, you know, nowadays there's a lot of platforms online where you can bid on projects. So there are these agencies that connect potential clients with videographers, photographers, digital marketers, software developers, like those kinds of things. So there was one, I mean, I don't even think they're around anymore, back in the day, that we bid on, and the client wasn't disclosed. It was anonymous. And we pitched an idea that they loved, and that brand ended up being Polaroid. So for us, that was like a huge, so that was kind of the gateway into it, right? Now we have this one brand with a legitimate budget where we can actually use the budget a little more freely to like be creative and give people their real rates and, you know, like operate. So we got, and then it's like, it's a foot in the door thing. You know, you get one, you learn how to leverage the one and make it into a few more. So that's kind of how it all started.
No, it's amazing. I actually saw the Polaroid video on your site.
Oh yeah.
And it was good. It was actually, it was cool to see that and then hear your story about it right now.
It was the first one. Yeah.
Nice.
First like brand people would recognize.
Yeah. I remember when YouTube first came out. So I was a literary manager for a long time, and I managed writers and directors, and I was producing, and I never picked up a camera until I had a YouTube channel and I was documenting breakdancing. DP one day couldn't come. And so I said, okay, I need to film this thing. So I bought a T3i, started filming. I sucked. And I was still getting, you know, views. And it wasn't until, of course, when I was, it was my side job that, of course, this thing was blowing up, and I quit my job so I can start doing this full time.
Yeah.
When brands start coming in and then start asking you for content, can you do this? You need that specific type of video. Like I'm telling a lot of mentees, you can't have a wedding video and try to sell it to a food company.
No, yeah.
You know, it's hard. You really have to be targeted these days. And
that's what I would say, kind of, you know, having proof of your work and then having a good idea that you're pitching. Like, even if you've never worked with a large brand, but if we had branded content for Polaroid, that's what mattered. And then they loved our idea. You know what I mean? So like those, like a synergy of those two things, really, you can, you know, stand out.
Yeah. So what is your process? Because I know that when you work with a brand, there's ways where you get like creative briefs. You have, you know, phone calls where you go back and forth. There's shot lists and storyboards. I mean, what's like your ideal situation? Yeah,
that's a great question. So basically, I mean, how we start. So for us, we produce content, but we also say, you know, or not say, what we do is very strategic, right? So we're trying to create branded content for you that you can leverage, and you can, you know, create some ROI, create some engagement, create like whatever your goals are. We're trying to create something for you that fulfill those goals. So our first step is always target audience. Who are you trying to target, and where is this video going? So my biggest thing, especially in the early days of this business, was brands, you know, we had started, when we started, we worked with a lot of startups, and with startups, they would come to us and they would have a pretty low budget, but we'd be like, okay, cool. Like, we'll make this work, you know? And but then once they'd produced the video, they didn't really know what they were going to do with it. So you can't spend $5,000 on a video and then not have $5,000 to go promote it. You know what I mean? Or to do something with it. So if you're putting it on your website, that's understandable. But like, is it for ads? Is it for marketing? Are you trying to increase your people, you know, your brand retention? Or do you need people to come and, you know, buy your shoes that you're selling? And like, you want to go from 10 shoes a day to 30 shoes a day, you know? So those are the types of things we try to understand very early on. So whichever concepts we pitch, we can be very strategic in what we're, you know, telling a client, you know, our best suggestions are. So that's usually kind of our development process starts with that. And then we conceptualize and bring, you know, we always bring clients a few ideas, a few directions we can go with the piece. And then once they sign on to that, it's somewhat of a traditional approach, you know, like scripting, prep, production, all that jazz. I will say the one thing we're big proponents of is prep. As you know, any filmmaker knows, as my first story told you, productions, whether they're 1 day or 100 days, are very unpredictable. So there's a lot of variables in the process. So we like to use prep as a stage to iron out whatever we can control as perfectly as possible, make sure the client knows what's up, our crew, our actors, everybody knows. So we are then prepared for whatever variables come on set. And that's kind of how we run things.
That's awesome. Calling all brands out there who are listening to this is how you approach the whole situation when you want to work with Reema. So, it's really interesting to hear about coming from the filmmaking background, also but having the marketing and communications and education and being a marketer. Mm-hmm. When you having that creative background, and you also have a journalism background too. So you have a lot of talents. It's pretty cool. Having a creative mind and then going into marketing, how was that transition? Because a lot of filmmakers right now, videographers and video creators, they need to go into that route. They need to actually become a YouTuber or a marketer, and they need to actually talk to their clients about, okay, this is where you upload your video. This is how you do tags and SEO. And this is how these are the times that you post it. That transition, when you went from filmmaking into marketing, was it an easy transition, or was it something that you really had to stretch your brain to understand, okay, marketing?
That's a good question. I mean, it's a little of both. It maybe wasn't too difficult per se, but the challenge was, it's not like that was an inherent interest I had, like learning about SEO or like all that stuff can be pretty dull and dry and mind numbing. Right. So, but once you kind of dive into it and you get like a overarching view of what it means and how it works and how quickly it changes, and you dive into it, it is a little more approachable than it seems. I think sometimes as a creative, we get that word's thrown around a lot. But part of being creative is being able to be, to be creative yourself, like to innovate yourself so you're more relevant to whatever's happening. It's not like a lot of times I think as artists, we talk about creativity and like an idea or how we're filming something, where the light's coming from, which is a very important type of creativity. But I think as you're transitioning into these, you have to just approach it a little differently. Once you dive into it, it's fun because I guess for me, it was kind of like my co-founder, Sonia, and I would use it as a process to kind of discover. So it's like, we would touch on a topic. Let's say you mentioned SEO, right? So, which I do none of now, but initially when we were starting, you have to know that stuff, right? I would try to understand it, but as I was understanding it, I was more trying to think of like, hey, how does this apply to video? Or do I see an opportunity here where I can be creative, but incorporate some of these things into it, right? So you kind of have to approach it like that. But the truth is some of it is just dry and dull. And when you're trying to run a business, you're going to do a lot of shit that you don't want to do. And so, but at the end of the rainbow is that it's like you just get your foot in the door. And after that, it opens up more where you're going to realize that you shouldn't be doing everything. You're going to hire someone who's going to be good at SEO. You're going to hire someone who's good at XYZ. But yeah, in the beginning, it wasn't particularly the most stimulating type of content that I was trying to.
It's true. I mean, it's true. I mean, especially SEO. I mean, SEO to me is just so mind numbing, and doing for me also just the analytic parts of everything and the insights and whatnot. And just hearing you say this, it's refreshing, because hearing filmmakers becoming, studio and agency owners and having to deal with the transition, it's good to hear that, because there's a lot of filmmaking in general. When I left, it was hardly any indies left, and for me, my whole thing was like, oh, I want to get a feature and whatnot. And people, the whole idea of like the late '90s and the Sundance and that time when people were buying independents for like $5 million, $10 million. Ooh, those were great times. And then
great times.
All of a sudden, the writers' strike hits in 2006 and 2007, and all the Focus Features and Fox Independents of the world all died. And so a lot of filmmakers now have to adapt and honestly, a lot of them become YouTubers. A lot of them become
Yeah.
wedding videographers, and they're adapting.
Mm-hmm.
And so with you right now, like with your creative mind and your marketing mind all together, what's your way of getting into that creative flow where you're switching hats back to creative and you have to come up with that idea? How do
Yeah.
you get into that flow of coming up with ideas? Do you watch movies? Do you go outside? Do you exercise? How do you get into your flow state?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's definitely a combination of things depending on like what I'm trying to ideate.
Mm-hmm.
It's a particular idea, like if I'm working on, let's say, a concept or a script, it's definitely watching a lot of short form content and being pretty granular in what I'm trying to look for. So having some direction, and then from there, it's conversation. So I think a big part of what helps like me and I would say a few people on our team get into that state is talking to each other. And I'd say brainstorm, but then brainstorm almost sounds like what you're trying to do. It's more just kind of like, so we do this thing bi-weekly as a team. We take 2 videos and we rotate it out. Each person picks 2 videos that they've seen that week, and we analyze it, and we do like a joint analysis, and we break it down. What worked, what didn't work, how was it shot, how difficult would it be to pull something like that off? What would, if we produce something like that, what would be the challenges? What's the creative, like, there's some ads you watch and they're amazing, they're so engaging, or you just want to keep watching them, and it's like, okay, well, what's the why? Like, what's so engaging? Is it the voiceover? Is it the story? Is it the beautiful shots? Like, so I think constantly keeping that alive really helps. But if we're sitting down and it's like, hey, we have to concept something or we have to script something, it's just like talking about it as a team. I talk to my partner a lot about it, talking to a friend, like, hey, what are you up to? Oh, I'm working on with this new brand and we're trying to come up with XYZ. And I think one important thing to remember, which I think a lot of filmmakers, I mean, at least when I was in school, we learned this, or you kind of hear about it, is, so what you mentioned before, I mean, I don't think what either of us are doing today, 10, 15 years ago, we knew was a thing, right? Yeah. So I think a lot of these paths are nonlinear. And the beauty of filmmaking, short form production, whatever it is like you need varied interests. Like if you know a lot about like, science and biology, or like you want to know about other topics which inspire you to come up with cool ideas. You can't just keep studying film. Like that's not going to give you any creative juices. So that way, like, I do read a lot and like about various topics and like what articles and books and stuff like that I think can be really inspiring too. And lends to.
It's brilliant. No, I love the idea. I actually love the idea of just analyzing short form and analyzing branded content, because that to me, it's interesting now because the length of short form is always changing, and there's just so many different styles. And look what TikTok has done with it. And then look what's going on with IG stories and of course IGTV, and then there's Facebook and there's Snapchat. And if for you with all this, I would say research you've been doing, like how has it changed your mind? I know you work with a client and saying, hey, what are your goals? Okay, who are your target audience? Where's your target audience at? Okay, they're on TikTok and they're on IG. Okay. What's the aspect ratio? Okay, we're doing square and vertical.
Yeah.
Okay, and then from there, let's figure out your CTA, and then what are we trying to do with this product? Blah, 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 blah. When you're going through that process and you're looking at these social media platforms, do you feel like a little overwhelmed, or do you feel like excited about working with these new platforms that are all on a phone rather than a nice theater, Cinerama Dome or IMAX that we would love to be at one day as a filmmaker?
Yeah, for sure. I think what you have to do is, I definitely don't find it limiting, because I don't think I'm trying to compare it to something. I don't think what I'm doing, I'm comparing to filmmaking per se, right? So I'm using the same skill sets, but I don't feel like, I'm trying to make a movie here per se. Those skill sets are inherent now. So those automatically get applied. Wanting to shoot something in a cinematic style, like that's just second nature now. So I don't have to think about it per se. So I don't think that part's too limiting. And I will say, I try to approach things, I mean, which is a little counter, but understanding the goals and coming up with an idea for those goals, irrespective of the platform in some ways, trying to be as platform agnostic as possible, because we also want to make content efficient, right? So if someone's purchasing a video or wants to produce something, it would be nice if they can take that footage and that investment and unveil it on several platforms or several whatever. Now, if they only want, they're targeting certain demographic that's only on TikTok and that's what their goals are, that is very specific. So you do need to kind of, make sure you're creating something that would work for that platform. But I try to think of that like second, first ideate, first figure out what the goals are and what would your ideal, concept or storyline or point of inspiration be, and then that floats in. So I think it doesn't actually feel that overwhelming when you're doing it if you're not comparing it to what film, what the other side is. So trying to keep them separate helps.
That's right. We're not trying to make an Avengers movie.
I know.
We're not trying to make a Requiem for a Dream for a Instagram video.
Exactly. Fun is found.
Yeah, when I'm speaking to you, it's really cool to have these conversations, especially when we talk about brand and content, and when it comes to balancing, right, the creative, the business, and the goals of that actual video. How is that conversation with the client itself? Do you feel like people are much more open to creativity as long as you're filling in the gaps and requirements? Or are people, because we talked about earlier, there are some brands who are very much traditional. Now there are more brands who are more open. So how do you, when you're trying to explain to a client, this creative choice or this creative idea you have, how do you really instill to them, like, it's really important to be creative. Creativity is great for you.
Yeah. Oh, yes, that's definitely a question. So I think there's two things at play. So one is when you're entering kind of this, when you're trying to transition from filmmaking or whatever art that you like or you're passionate about, and you're trying to pivot into something that's either more relevant or that can sustain a little bit of stability in what you're doing. There are going to be times when you are going to be limited. And that whole phrase of, like the customer is always right will ring true. So you can't really get into any sort of deep seated. That's why for us, when you present strategy to a client, when you try to present the why more clearly, where they can see, at the end of the day, it's marketing, right? So they're trying to look for something tangible. Like this is going to increase. Like I want to see something go from 0 to 10, like they need to see that shift. Right. If you can connect your idea and find some, data, statistics, facts that would be convincing, that always helps when you're trying to approach a client and pitch them something that might be a little unique, or that might be, even sometimes creativity lies in trying to push for diversity on screen, right? To try and encourage a client to maybe show a little bit more diversity. Some clients don't think that's their demographic, so it might not be the most relevant for them. So you have to kind of help them if you think that is the way to go, you have to show them why trying to capture this demographic could be valuable to them. I think presenting it in that way always helps, but then also it is important to know that you could present some ideas and they might know how they want to do things, and that's just how it's going to be, you're not like, that's not the moment you're like, this part of the business is not where the passionate fight occurs, that's on the other side of things. So that's just kind of how it goes.
I know that you also work with directors. Do you feel like there are moments where you feel like it's better to work with a director who's aware of the marketing rather than the very talented director who is all about just my way or the highway?
Oh, 100%. We mostly in-house direct. We direct everything in-house. Good. On occasion, we'll hire a freelance director or, hire a director, but 100%, I would say anybody that we're hiring, it is more about process first for them to understand, because a lot of what we're doing in this side of things, like what I said, even in indie filmmaking, is like, you have to be able to adapt, right? So if we need people that understand that this is going to be a very fluid, flexible process with a client that is involved at most stages, right? That might nix certain actors, that might say, hey, I don't like that location or that angle. One thing I will say to make sure it's not a total cop out for us, like what we do, is is what we call set protocol. So one thing to be attuned to is to make sure you have your eyes and ears open when you're working with your clients to really understand their personality and where you think they're going to lie. Like, big question, is your client going to be on set with you? You know, like, are they? And if they are on set, so anytime we have clients on set, we send out what we call a set protocol, where we kind of at that point let them know this is how a set works. This is your point of contact. You can't, you know, be the client on set and interrupt a director and DP as they're working. At the end of the day, that's the moment you trust us, and you either like or you hate the video you get, you know, but like, you can't be interfering with that process. Otherwise we can't be as creative as we have told you we will be, you know? So there are moments like that you should, you know, for a lack of a better phrase, put your foot down. But you have to just know, like, also, is it like, sometimes, you know, if you think a client might, you know, be a little vocal or step on some toes, and then you feel like you need to make sure you preemptively deal with that.
That's such a great template that you should be using as a lead magnet, by the way, is protocol.
Good to know.
I'll love that to give that to clients, because there's some people who just don't know. I mean, the people who like to answer the phone in the middle of middle of a shot. Like, come on, my friend. Really?
Yeah, seriously. Oh God.
Well, you know what? Also, just quickly, I want to know more about your thoughts on the lockdown situation in COVID-19 and how you have been able to, I would say, transition and adapt in this situation to really help a lot of other filmmakers, video creators, and agency people out there. I mean, just to talk about it, because we are dealing with it right now. Totally. How are you adapting, and how do you feel about the situation?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, right? So it definitely shifts the work we do. We primarily do live action, you know, on-set productions that are at least 10 people. Even kind of our smaller ones end up being 10 people on set. So we're obviously not able to do that, but it's been an interesting time where it has opened an opportunity, what we were talking about before, for us to be more creative, because, you know, a lot of people are suffering. Obviously, marketing budgets are the first to go. So for us, it's kind of like, okay, well, internally, what can we offer, or what is something new or interesting that someone might need right now? And how can we use our creativity to serve that market? So it's actually been a very exploratory phase. I will say, in terms of like business development, I think there are a lot of brands and businesses that don't have large budgets at the moment to spend on, but they are understanding the importance of connecting to their audience right now more than ever, especially if they've pivoted their own business, if they're still up and running, if they have new offerings. Being able to communicate those is really important. But for us, it does mean a shift in, one, the type of content we're creating, and then how we're creating that content. I actually think a lot of videographers and filmmakers right now, who kind of, you know, who know how to shoot stuff and go out and capture footage, are in a very, very good position to leverage their skills. You can be a one-man band, as I said earlier. I mean, I think that's super valuable right now. And I think viewers if you see, like, user-generated content is so popular right now. And you can do so much with putting stuff together and adding text and music and a deep message that ends up being compelling, you know? So there's a lot of appetite. I think everyone's just trying to figure out what it is. And we are too. So yeah, I mean, in terms of specifics of what we're doing, we are doing a lot more kind of digital content, so graphical animation type of stuff.
Nice.
We are pitching, you know, remote directing, which is a fun way of filming in different locations, you know, having actors film in their own locations, being on Zoom and directing the piece like that. So that's kind of a fun one that we're exploring with, and there's definitely some appetite for. So it's cool. We get to be creative, but it'll be interesting. I mean, I do think there's going to be a pretty big shift in how all this affects our type of business.
No, I totally agree. And I think that it's good to know that you're also pivoting and you're seeing yourself as being flexible and adaptable, because there are people out there who are still stuck in the mindset of, I'm just going to wait until this whole thing is done.
Yeah. And
then I'm going to, you know, go out and do sales and try to do the same old thing that I was doing last year. And so I think it's hard for those type of people to deal with, but I understand why some people can think that way.
Exactly. And I think, again, when you're in this stage or you're trying to get into this stage, I think being agile is really important. It's like what you said earlier. If you have only shot wedding, videos, and then you want to make a brand promo, like there's a bit of a disconnect, But if you think right now, like, hey, what do I think? What are people going to need, or what businesses are open, or what are the current problems right now? And if you explore that a little bit and you're willing to adapt or change, what you're doing or what you're offering, or, I mean, going out and, I know it sounds trite, but going out and shooting your own stuff, on your iPhone, like, you never know what you're going to get. But I think for us, like, the one thing is really trying to just see where we think things are going to go, like just industry wise. What are people going to do? Where's the shift going to be? How are people going to make decisions about their budgets? What are they going to want to spend it on? And then seeing, like, once we figure those answers out, okay, like, now let's connect the dots. What can we do there? Like, what are we capable of and what are we missing? And then if we're missing something, let's find people that are really good at that.
No, that's so true. And that's sage advice for all the filmmakers out there. And actually, before we go, because I know that you are busy as a entrepreneur and a founder of a company, and I definitely understand. What is your last, I would say, thoughts and advice to filmmakers who do want to start their own company and get into marketing? What would you say to them as just videographers? Actually, filmmakers. Let's talk about filmmakers, because it's a very distinct difference between videographers and filmmakers. What do you want to say to filmmakers who do want to start their own production company and get into the space of marketing? Because there are a lot of people who are approaching me and asking me that question.
For sure. It's gonna be some tough love.
Oh yeah.
But I would say, you have to separate yourself out from being a filmmaker. You're trying to become a creative professional. So figure out what that means, right?
Nice.
And I think that's like what we did is we brought sort of that professionalism and that business side of things to creativity, and that's how you have to approach it. Mm-hmm. So it's not going to always be, the filmmaking process is so rich and it's so satisfying, and you get to keep your mind as open as possible. And that's the whole point, and be imaginative. You already are good at that. So kind of put that on hold a little bit and explore what it means to be a business professional and a creative professional in those terms. I will say, I think for us, one of the reasons our clients come back to us or enjoy working with us is we've brought a system to this process, and we've brought we communicate really well. There were times back in the day when you're making films, you're up at, 2 a.m. coming up with ideas, or, but we don't, I'm not saying we don't do that anymore, but that's not how we approach this world. So I would say try to leave the term filmmaking, on the shelf for a little bit and explore what try to hone in on what all of that means, because you're already good at that part. So it's definitely kind of the tug of war of strengthening both sides. But
oh, that's awesome. I wish you told me that about 10 years ago.
I know.
I wish I knew that. Instead of maxing out credit cards.
Always hindsight.
Yeah, but Reema, thank you so much. Honestly, just have a conversation with a fellow filmmaker and entrepreneur and digital marketer. It's just refreshing to have a conversation like that. What you guys are creating at Luminous is beautiful. Well done. Even your website is well designed. So,
thanks.
Before we go, can you let people know where to find you and also how to support you? Yeah,
definitely. First of all, thank you for having me. This was super fun. I love what I do, so it's really fun when I get to talk about it. But yeah, they can all visit our website. My email and contact info is directly there. I'd love to hear from people, even if you just want to chat or throw around ideas or talk about what's going on right now. I'm always open. And follow us on Instagram. That's kind of we're unveiling some new content there. So I'd love to get feedback from people on what they're liking, what they're not liking. Mm-hmm. It's all constructive. So yeah, I'm always open to talking. So they can just send me an email.
Cool. And that's at Luminous
Studios, yeah.
At Luminoustudios. Everyone check them out. Add them, DM them, like, share, comment, everything.
Yes, thank you. This was wonderful.
Yeah, thanks so much, Reema. And good luck with everything. Good luck with the lockdown, and hand sanitizer, wash your hands, wear a mask. Thanks so
Likewise,
much.
right back at you.
Thank you for listening to the Creative Haven podcast. And if you dig it and like what you heard today, please give us a nice review and rating and share it with one of your friends that you think needs some creative inspiration. You can always find more content and resources at thecreativehaven.com and hit me up on Instagram at Mitchel Dumlao. And if you want to reach out, collab, or ask any questions, you have my permission to slide into my DMs. So keep positive, continue to learn and hone your craft, and create all day. Salamat.